We are back with another episode of App Stories. This episode is brought to you by Devon Think, Linode, and Pillow. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. How's your week going so far, Federico?
Well, hi. It's going well. It's an exciting week. We have an Apple event coming up.
I know. It's the quiet before the storm, as they say.
Yes. In theory, we have a new iPad Pro coming out, so that's exciting. There's a good chance I'm going to switch my main computer relatively soon.
Right.
I hope to a more modern version. So it's exciting, and maybe a bunch of new accessories. We'll see, but I'm feeling good about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. It feels like it's been a long time since we had an event, and I guess that's because it really has been kind of a long time. And we had quite a bit there in the fall. It felt kind of relentless with the OS releases and events and everything all throughout the fall and into almost the holiday season. But here we are, 5-6 months later, and this is our first Apple event. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well.
We had 3 events back to back and then nothing, and now we're
Right.
back to the usual business.
I think we needed the rest, so I'm glad that we had a little time off from events. But this is like the first thing that gets us a little bit ramped up for WWDC, which is always a period of the year that I always feel more energized for, because the winter, it's the winter. You're indoors a lot. It's dark outside. It's cold, and there's less going on in the tech world, and it becomes a little bit of a slog after a while. But here we are. It's springtime, and all kinds of new things are coming our way, hopefully, in terms of hardware and then OS betas and that sort of thing. So we'll have plenty of material for a very long time, I believe.
Yeah.
All right, Federico, what's new with you these days? What are you working on?
Well, you mentioned WWDC. It's that time of year again for me where
Yes.
I am preparing for what's coming. And each year I try to take stock of the things that went wrong in the previous year, or more broadly speaking, I think I try to optimize my workflow for my changing nature as a person, obviously, but as a writer and as somebody who relies on a bunch of different apps on iPhone and iPad. So it's the kind of workflow that is in constant evolution, but which I'm also constantly optimizing. And so I've been talking on this podcast and Unconnected, especially for the past couple of weeks, about the idea of capturing information, right? And saving ideas and saving those kind of notes that will become at some point, I call them unconnected future tasks, in the sense that those are bits of ideas and random notes that are not tasks yet, but they're definitely also not articles that can go into my text editor.
Right.
So, and the more I started looking into this, the more I stumbled across again an old issue, an old problem of mine, which is I realized that one of the things that I fundamentally dislike about my task management setup, and in general, I think about task managers, is that a task manager in the traditional sense, it doesn't really scale, it doesn't really adapt to writers, to authors, because I realized how so many of my tasks are things that originate from a document, that originate from a markdown document, right? Little notes, little tasks that I leave for myself that are related to the thing I'm writing, and it can be creative writing, or it can be admin writing, like documentation for Mac Stories or ideas for Mac Stories and the club, right?
Right.
But those, and you actually wrote about this, John, in the latest issue of Mac Stories Weekly last week. You had a shortcut that lets you have bi-directional linking between Craft and Good Task.
Right.
So Craft is the note-taking app, and Good Task is your task manager, and that, to me, is one of the many problems that I've always wanted to solve somehow. And so I've been. This is a very long introduction for what is going to be a thing that I'm gonna say on the show, and you and a bunch of people are gonna have questions for the next few weeks. So all of this to say that a few weeks ago I started thinking about this problem again, And I reached not a conclusion, but a realization, I guess, of maybe something that could work for me would be a totally customizable text editor that would allow me to make my own system, to build my own system, right? Because like every text editor that I ever tried, and I'm using IA Writer, and I love IA Writer, but it's a very opinionated app, right? It's not exactly it's not an extensible text editor.
No.
It's not a highly customizable text editor either. But what I realized was, what if I could have a text editor that allowed me to take full control of the writing experience and the editing experience, but also saving ideas and saving tasks and browsing those tasks, right? So, okay. So
right.
I have been playing, and I plan on using, if everything goes according to plan, Obsidian.
Wow.
For the past few weeks. I've been playing with Obsidian for the past few weeks. And let me explain. So Obsidian is a powerful markdown based note-taking app for desktop.
Right.
That is one of the unique things about Obsidian is that its database is not a custom thing. It's entirely based on a bunch of markdown text files. MD, standard plain text MD files that you keep in a folder somewhere in your file system.
Mm-hmm.
What's unique about Obsidian is the obscene amount of linking and searching options that you have for your notes. It's kind of sometimes kind of a joke at this point that, you know, all of these note-taking apps are doing backlinking and wiki style links because that's, you know, what's fashionable these days. But Obsidian is the implementation of that feature, right? The fact that you can create these links between notes and you can find these connections between notes, but really you can search all your files and find exactly what you're looking for. Now, you may have seen Obsidian and you may have heard about Obsidian and you may have seen those screenshots that people take about the knowledge graph in Obsidian, right?
Yeah.
With that graph with all those nodes connected to each other.
Right, it looks like a galaxy or something, like a solar system.
Yeah, and you may have seen, you know, these screenshots of people with 10,000, 20,000 notes.
Yeah.
You know, these are usually academics or engineers, you know, those kinds of people. Now, here's the thing. I don't care about that stuff in Obsidian.
I'm not surprised.
And I don't think, and I feel like most of the time people take a screenshot of the graph.
It's a weird flex.
It's fancy.
It's a weird flex.
It's a weird flex, exactly. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really do anything.
No, it just, you can kind of, it rubber bands and you can kind of drag little dots around. And I've kind of looked at it and had the same experience thinking, well, this isn't for me, but let's see what else is here.
That graph is the markdown nerd version of the iTunes visualizer.
Oh, it basically is. That's very good. I hadn't thought of that.
That's what it is. So it's really, I don't want to say it's useless. I think it makes for a good screenshot. I think it makes for good bragging on Twitter and the Obsidian forums. It's not really what fascinates me about Obsidian.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by DevonThink. Whether you're in the harbor or on the high seas, you need to know where you are and where you're sailing. If you have all the maps, books, and documents, DevonThink for Mac or DevonThink to Go for iOS will not let you down on your mission to help you navigate the 7 seas of information. All right, all jokes aside, DevonThink helps you get organized in your office, home office, or on the go. Look, everybody has loads of documents, bookmarks, notes, snippets, and it's hard to keep track of all that stuff. That is, unless you're using DevonThink, which elegantly handles all of that and a whole lot more in one neat, tidy, and organized place. Organize everything in whatever way makes sense to you and let DevonThink's unique AI assist you all the way with filing and finding. And if that wasn't enough, smart rules and flexible reminders lets you delegate all of the boring repetitive tasks to DevonThink too. There's even a bunch of shortcuts on iOS that lets you integrate DevonThink to Go with your other apps. Of course, whatever you keep in your database remains yours. It's all stored locally, and nothing is uploaded anywhere unless you say so. The app's flexible synchronization technology uses strong encryption to make sure that you have all of your important documents with you on whatever device you're working on or taking with you, and all of it securely. Use iCloud, Dropbox, or any web dev service to synchronize, or synchronize directly over your local network. And of course, there's so much more, from email archiving and scanning to an embedded web server for sharing your data securely with your team. Right now, App Stories listeners can get 10% off on DevonThink 3 or upgrades by going to the URL devontechnologies.com/appstories. Again, that URL to get 10% off DevonThink 3 and upgrades is devontechnologies.com/appstories. Our thanks to DevonThink for their support of the show.
There's another aspect to Obsidian that I think it's much more intriguing and fascinating, and for me, and I'm gonna get to the main topic here, more powerful, potentially powerful going forward, which is the complete extensibility of Obsidian. You can make all kinds of plugins for Obsidian.
Yeah.
So in addition to, there's an entire aspect about like the visual customization of Obsidian.
Yeah, you can basically skin it however you want using CSS, right?
Yes, you can skin it. You can make custom themes. You can choose custom fonts and colors, and you can tweak existing themes via custom CSS snippets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fine if you wanna, and I've been doing it myself to tweak a few things I don't like about the theme I'm using. But really, the core aspect of this is you can make plugins for the text editor, and anybody can do it because Obsidian is on the desktop. It's an Electron app, and it's based on web technologies. Now, it's not. It has to be one of the less terrible Electron apps I've tried. It's definitely weird in a lot of places.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, it has those things about Electron that people don't like a weird preference pane and nothing in the menu bar on the Mac. However, one of the things, it's probably the fastest Electron app that I've ever tried, which is really saying something. I mean, it opens instantaneously, which, so many Electron apps are resource hogs. This app is not, which that goes a long way to making me okay with it.
Yeah. So the thing about the extensibility in Obsidian goes hand in hand for me with the fact that you take a look at some of the more specific functionalities of the Obsidian text editor, and you start to understand how this is an app made for writers. And when I realized that, and I took a look at some of the features that Obsidian has, such as what they call transclusion, what effectively is what I've been doing for the past few years in IA Writer,
right,
under a different name. IA Writer calls it content blocks. Obsidian calls it transclusion or file embeds. But the idea would be that you can create these tables of content and you can reference notes inside of other notes, right?
Right.
So you can embed a document within another document. And then if you want, you can export the entire compiled result. That's what I've been doing in IA Writer for the past few years. Now, the thing is, in Obsidian, this feature doesn't exist, right? In the export feature, the compile feature. You can reference files inside of each other, but you can't really compile and export the result.
Right. It's more for a viewing thing, right?
It's more for a viewing thing. But I saw that feature and I realized it was built for the preview, but I actually want it for the export side of it. So as a test for all of because I when I saw that feature and when I read about the plugins, that light bulb went off in my brain, and I was like, I'm having a feeling right now.
I feel like you went back to, 2015 maybe. I feel like you're right back there in editorial land in a way.
2013.
2013, yes, okay.
It was that kind of moment. It was like, I literally went, huh. Okay.
Yes, and I think I told you that I felt like when I first tried this, that I felt like this was an OS for writers because it's the amount of things.
Very good point.
The number of things you can do here is almost limitless if you have the skill to build plugins.
So I got in touch with the Mac Stories Special Projects team, your son.
Team of one.
John.
Team of one, yes.
Team of one. And I said, Finn, look, this feature doesn't really exist. But can we make a plugin that does what I want in terms of compiling a table of contents and exporting a compiled draft with some very specific settings for me? It was like, yeah, sure, seems pretty easy. I can get it done for you. And so in a couple of days, Finn made this custom plugin called Export Markdown with Embeds. I think it's the name. And it does like this. Again, this feature does not exist in Obsidian. It just made a plugin using the native Obsidian API. And I installed the plugin. And the plugins in Obsidian can do anything you want. They can control what's in the text editor. They can present a custom UI inside of the application. They can export stuff, right? And so now I have this plugin that obviously I can assign to a specific keyboard shortcut, because that's also another aspect of Obsidian. You can totally customize the keyboard shortcuts.
Right.
You can create new keyboard shortcuts, but you can also customize the basic commands. And so now when I hit a combination of buttons, a little dialog comes up, and it says, "Okay, I compiled the draft for you. Do you want to export it to the clipboard, or do you want to create a new document for it?" And also we added a setting that you can choose to automatically increase the level of headings in the compiled documents.
Oh,
so the idea would be,
I know why you do that.
The idea would be you can. So if you're writing a novel or an OS review like me,
right.
You can write individual chapters as individual files, and you can use H1 headings, right? As the title of the chapter, and then H2 for the sections. But then if you want to compile those chapters, the H1 should become an H2, and an H2 should be an H3, and so forth. So we added a toggle in the plugin UI that lets you automatically increase by 1 the level of referenced headings.
That's very cool.
And so now I have this plugin, and so that confirmed my suspicion. The second major realization was Obsidian, they're working on an iPhone and iPad app that, as a supporter of Obsidian, they have different levels of subscription that you can sign up for. And the VIP and supporter levels, they get access to the private beta of the iPhone and iPad app. And initially I thought, okay, knowing this kind of company, this is going to be one of those companion utilities that like isn't as powerful as the desktop version. That was my concern. But nope, it's the full Obsidian experience, including the fact that you can install custom plugins and themes and CSS snippets. And you can customize keyboard shortcuts so you can do whatever you want. And on iPad, obviously, and on iPhone too, it supports multiple panels, so you can have multiple columns. You can split the UI in like 3-4 panels. You can do whatever you want. And so I realized, well, if this is coming to iPad, and it's based on standard Markdown files, and it's got all these features that I really want to have in its text editor, including native backup and restore, full text search, customizable keyboard shortcuts, and if I can make my own themes and my own scripts for compiling stories and my own plugins. And then you said that line that I keep thinking about, it's like an OS for writers. I realized, can I actually make my the text editor that I've always wanted to use for me? And so this is what I'm sort of building toward at the moment. Obviously, the Obsidian beta on iPhone and iPad is still very much in the early stages.
Yeah, it's a little rough, but it's very early. It just came out recently, didn't it?
Yeah, just I believe a month ago or something. So my plan is to, if everything goes according to plan with the plugins that we're building now and with the development of Obsidian, my plan, honestly, is to move all of my writing to Obsidian.
Interesting.
So notes, articles, long form stories, all of it.
Wow.
I feel pretty good about that because I know that at the end of the day, moving those files literally involves just copying a folder from one location to another.
Right.
Obsidian doesn't lock me into a proprietary database or ecosystem. It's just standard plain text files.
You could even use it with another text editor if you wanted to. As long as the text editor can point to a folder, an arbitrary folder, you can absolutely use both at the same time on the same files because it's just Markdown.
Yep. You can, for example, use, I know that a bunch of people do this. On iOS, you can use OneWriter, which is a text editor, point it to the Obsidian folder as an external location. And the backlinks in Obsidian, they keep working in OneWriter.
Yeah, that's nice.
The OneWriter developer added support for backlinking, and the format is consistent, so you can use another text editor if you don't want it. Because, again, it's just a folder of text files.
Right.
And Obsidian is the front end for those text files. So the idea is we are now working on a much, much, much more complex plugin. Well, when I say we,
you mean Finn.
I really mean Finn. Finn is working on it. I bring the ideas.
Yes, you
Finn
do.
Works his magic. And the idea is for me to create a sort of like a scaffolding for this summer, right? Where I have this structure in place for my writing and all kinds of things that are related to the review. So keeping track of tasks inside of the review.
Right, and your research and all that too, I assume.
And my research, right? And so it's going to be fascinating to build this entirely custom system for me that hopefully at some point maybe we could open up to people as well. But the idea is let's start with the exporting the draft. Okay, that's done. We have a custom plugin for that now. The second plugin we're working on, task management, right? How can I integrate Obsidian with my task manager? And the thing we're working on, I think it's going to be pretty sweet. After that, we could take a look at images. How do we want to simplify saving screenshots for betas of iOS 15 and referencing them in my draft of the review, right? So Obsidian gives me the power to do this. And I think, and it's very exciting, and I feel the same excitement that I used to feel back in 2012 when I was beta testing editorial. I feel like I'm back to that in a different way. It's a very different kind of app.
Yeah.
But I do feel that sense of power and control over my text editor again.
Yeah, no, and it's an exciting app. I have been playing with it a little bit too, not nearly as long as you have. And I think some of the integrations with different kinds of image formats and audio files and other things like that are kind of a sleeper feature in a sense, because I've always found it very difficult. Like every single week, I usually deal with emails from people who are going to advertise on Mac Stories where I get a collection of materials. I get images, I get text, and all these things together. And I've always found it difficult to find a place where I can store that, where when it comes to uploading those images to our CDN, it's just a matter of navigating to a folder, then uploading it. That seems simple, but very few apps allow you to do that in a way that preserves the structure and integrity of the images, without compressing them or changing the format, and does it in a file folder system next to the Markdown that keeps everything in one place and organized. I've always found that I've almost always found it easier to keep everything in email and find my email again, which is not a particularly good system. It's really no system at all. And little things like that have really intrigued me, and I've been exploring it too. I do need to find a way to customize the UI more to my liking, because I'm not a big fan of the defaults, and I think there are some good themes, but you and I have been, we type a lot, and you get very particular about the way your app looks when you type a lot. And I've been using IA Writer for a long time, and before that Ulysses, and I like the way those two apps look and the way that I could tweak it just the way I exactly wanted. And you can do that with Obsidian too. I just need to mess around a little more with the CSS snippets and find a good base theme, that kind of thing.
So yeah, I guess we'll talk about this again at some point soon.
Yeah, we should have a whole episode about this not too long from now.
Yes, and we should follow the progress around this aspect of my writing and preparation for the iOS review. Do not ask Finn about the thing is working on.
This is a very weird situation where Finn and Federico know far more about what's going on here than I do. I have been playing with the app myself, as I said, but I don't know very much about what the two of them have been working on.
Yeah, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So we'll talk about this again at some point. But yeah, in the meantime, a few people. I've been talking on the Obsidian Discord and the forums. It's a very nice and lovely community.
Oh, good.
So it's yeah, I pop in there, and a few people recognize me and are like, why haven't you talked about this on Connected? And I'm like, yeah, well, gonna talk about it soon on my podcasts because I know it's gonna be a whole thing about it.
Sure.
Yeah, it's fun, and we'll talk about this again at some point.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by our friends at Linode. You can simplify your cloud infrastructure with Linode's Linux virtual machines, helping you develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing enterprise infrastructure, you deserve simple, affordable, and accessible cloud computing solutions that allow you to take your project to the next level. Linode has data centers all around the world with the same simple and consistent pricing, regardless of the location. Linode's new cloud manager makes it super easy to set up a server near you with low latency. You can expect simple pricing and no hidden fees, unlike other cloud hosting companies that might charge you for services you may not use. And you can check it out all for free. Get started right now with Linode today with $100 in free credit for listeners of App Stories by going to linode.com/appstories. In addition to shared and dedicated compute instances, you can use your $100 credit on S3 compatible object storage, managed Kubernetes, and more. You know who's doing exactly that? Mac Stories is doing that. We have a very big project up and running on Linode right now that uses managed Kubernetes. If it runs on Linux, it runs on Linode. So head on over to linode.com/appstories and click on the Create Free Account button to get started. Go there now and check it out. Our thanks to Linode for their support of App Stories. All right, Federico, let's dive into this week's topic.
The main topic.
I know that was quite a teaser for a future episode of App Stories, but today we're going to conclude our 3-part miniseries on music, and we're going to talk today about a topic that I think you're going to hear an awful lot from Federico on, because this isn't something I've had as much experience with, but it's alternative and companion streaming services. I've always kind of stayed with one service at a time. And for the last several years, it's been Apple Music. I will say that I have signed up for Spotify, which isn't so much a matter of following Federico's lead as it is an attempt to get one of those car thing devices that were announced last week. But I've been messing around with Spotify too. But this isn't really about the core streaming services that we use. We talked about those in episode 1. This is more about things that complement those kind of services and what you might use.
Yeah, so the idea is that I'm right there with you actually. It's not like I'm using multiple well, there's an exception, but really I'm not using multiple streaming services.
Right.
It's not like I'm jumping between Spotify and Tidal and Qobuz. Like I'm using Spotify as my primary music streaming service. There's a secondary service that I use every once in a while that I'm going to mention in a few minutes. But I just wanted to talk about these services because I think each of them, they bring something interesting to the table. And maybe, the main, players here, Apple and Spotify, there's a bunch of features that I would like them to consider from each of these lesser known, perhaps, services. And I think it's fascinating also in the context of when people say, "Oh, but it's not possible to implement this functionality," and that's usually not true, because you can just look outside of Apple Music and Spotify, and you can see all kinds of interesting takes on music playback, search, discovery, curation, right?
Right.
So I think it's important to at least have some basic level of familiarity with these services.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, I guess I'll kick this off with a service that I discovered earlier this winter, which is an add-on to Bands in Town. Bands in Town is an iOS app, and I guess a web service too, that can ingest your music library and then tell you what bands are playing in your area. And that was a pretty nice service up until the pandemic. And they've been, pivoting as a lot of companies have done, and they've moved into something called Bands in Town Plus, which is a streaming service for live music. Now, it's $10 a month, and I took a look at it. They kind of started, I think, in January with a bit of a splash with some bigger names, but I actually have not signed up for this because one of the problems is there isn't a critical mass of bands and other artists here that I want to see. Now they have had artists like Charlie XCX, Fleet Foxes, Jeff Tweedy, and I saw Tycho and Phoebe Bridgers on there too. All acts that I'd love to see myself. The problem is that they tend to be spread out. A lot of those were early in the service, and they tend to be fairly spread out. And I don't feel like the value is quite there yet. Like I look at the lineup and I think, well, there might be one band I'd want to see per month. And for $10 a month, I'd like it to be a little bit more than that. But I mention it, one, because it's early in the development of Bands in Town Plus. And so perhaps that will improve over time. But also because I feel like the real company that should be doing this is Apple or Spotify, because they are both much larger than Bands in Town. They already have relationships with artists all over the world. And I think live music is something that they really need to do more of. And in fact, just last week, Spotify did announce that they have more partnerships with some of these other services that I know you're going to mention, Federico. They are doing some things with live music over at Spotify, but it's pretty few and far between with Apple Music. I mean, Apple Music has its own special events, like they had that Billie Eilish live performance that preceded the documentary that she did. And they've done things when they do their awards show. And there've been a couple of other events here and there. But for the most part, they haven't really gone very far down the path on live music.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to mention a few live music services in a few minutes. I'm not really familiar with Bands in Town, so thank you for mentioning that. The other ones there's another one that I want to cover, but it's not as exciting. I think at least the catalog of bands, it's not nearly as exciting. We're going to talk about that in a few.
That's part of the problem. Is it's not even just the catalog. Is that there are a lot of these services that I've been seeing artists who are scrambling during the pandemic use. There's one called Dice that I had never heard of, and I used it for an event, and it was okay. But a lot of these are pretty rudimentary and not very good apps. And I feel like there's room here for a bigger company to come in and do a much better production. I mean, Apple's obviously very good at streaming. They stream their own events to, hundreds of thousands, millions of people without a hitch, and have pretty good apps for doing that. A lot of these smaller players just aren't great apps.
Hundreds of thousands of millions. Did
I say hundreds? Did I say hundreds of
thousands? I think you said
millions.
Hundreds of thousands of millions.
Oh yes, that's exactly what I mean. I meant trillions and billions.
Sure, that's a lot of people. The next service I want to mention is Amazon Music HD.
Okay.
So specifically the HD tier of Amazon Music. So we mentioned a bunch of times on Mac Stories and App Stories how it's starting to feel a little strange that everybody in this music streaming space has a higher priced, high resolution tier for lossless audio, and Apple Music still doesn't have such tier.
They fixed it by getting rid of the HomePod.
Sure, you can. That could be a fix, but I believe in this space. Obviously, Spotify Hi-Fi hasn't launched yet. But at the moment, one of the more interesting options is what Amazon is doing with Amazon Music HD, which is aggressively priced, I believe, at $15 a month for high resolution audio. So Amazon Music HD, I started using it as this is the service that I meant when I said I have one that I consider my secondary service. I started using it a few months ago as sort of the service that I use to quote unquote test albums before I actually go out and buy and purchase an album in high resolution. I use Amazon Music HD on my iPhone paired with an external portable DAC. I have the FIO Q5S portable DAC, and that's basically like it looks like a little hard drive that you plug into your iPhone, and it's basically it's necessary to drive my Sony headphones, which I could plug with an adapter into my iPhone, but the iPhone alone wouldn't be able to drive those headphones at full volume. So you need an external DAC to drive those headphones. And basically, I use it in combination with Amazon Music HD to listen to an album, to stream an album in high resolution before committing to purchase the album. There's a few things I like about Amazon Music HD. Obviously, it's the only other service in addition to Apple Music that at the moment, I'm not sure if it's the only one. Maybe Deezer has this feature, but I'm not really familiar with Deezer. In any case, Amazon Music HD can do real-time lyrics. They are called X-ray lyrics because of the, Amazon has a bunch of different
they do this
X-ray
with books,
functionalities. They do this with books. They do this with Prime Video too, I believe.
Right.
X-ray is the feature that lets you inspect finer details of media. And in this case, that would be real-time lyrics. So they support real-time lyrics, which is really nice. It's they support different locales. So for example, in Italy, I get Italian curation and Italian charts and spotlights on different Italian artists and all that kind of stuff because they have a team in Italy.
How do they do with things like liner notes? Because I would think that would be the perfect X-ray feature.
Yeah, they have some, but it's not nearly as extensive as other services that we're going to mention in a few minutes.
Okay.
They have basically the same, I think they have the same basic sort of written by, produced by information that you can also see in Spotify. It's the very basic level, I think.
All right.
Yeah, you can create personal radio stations. You can obviously create playlists. They have an app on the Mac, iPhone, and iPad. So it's pretty basic. It looks Amazon-y. It's got that Amazon design, but it's very aggressively priced. And it's a good way to test high-resolution audio before committing to purchase that music somewhere else.
Yeah, well, that alone, I think, is a really nice aspect of it because it gets expensive if you're buying a lot of your music in HD. One of the things about Apple Music in particular, I don't know if this is true with Spotify, is that a lot of people who enjoy classical music don't like Apple Music because it's never done a great job of organizing and filtering various types of classical music. So as a result, I think a lot of services have sprung up around that. I know you've got one listed here called Primephonic. What's Primephonic all about?
And I got just the service for you if you don't like classical music in Apple Music. So Primephonic it's really fascinating. This is, for me at least, like I love services like this because they serve a very specific niche of music listener. And they do it extremely well for that kind of listener. So Primephonic is all about classical music, right? The only music you can listen to in Primephonic is classical music. And because of this single focus on classical music, they were able to really dive deep on several aspects surrounding classical music. So they have smart search for composers and different versions and concerts for a specific piece, right? What's really unique about this service is the fact that they have human curators. So curation first approach with a team of curators that assemble, they put together these custom playlists and artist spotlights and composer spotlights and conductor spotlights, right? All these different playlists, if you will, to get you started with classical music. And they have a really nicely done onboarding experience when you first install Primephonic. And they basically guide you through the process of, are you new to classical music and you want to get started, or are you an expert and you already have your favorite artists and you just want to listen to some music? Right. That's really nicely done. What's also interesting, they combine music and podcast interviews in the same service. So, for example, you may find a particular article or like a story about a chief conductor, right? And that page contains both like the curator's picks for that conductor as well as a prime phonic interview with that person.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
You can listen to the interview and then you can listen to the music. And I think it's really fascinating. Like, imagine if on streaming services you could have that kind of feature where you land on the page for the latest album by the 1975, right? And right there in the page, you get this like article and a bio and an interview, like an all-in-one package.
Right.
And I think Prime Phonic is really fascinating because of that, like the all-in-one package for classical music, whether it's about interviews or reading the bios or, having custom playlists, all coming together. And I think it's really nicely done. So if you're into classical music, obviously there's a high resolution tier that is more expensive. I feel like if you're into classical music, you also have really good equipment
right.
at home to listen to that music. So go check this out.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I like the idea of the multimedia type of landing page because there are elements of that in things like Spotify and Apple Music, but they're not really integrated very well.
All kind of disjointed, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the other service for live music that I hinted at a few minutes ago, nugs.net. So that would be nugs.net. Now, the idea is interesting. This is a service all about live concerts and being able to enjoy those concerts in audio and video formats. Now, there's two problems with nugs.net. The first one is you cannot try it for free unless you start a trial with your payment information.
That's no fun.
And that's not fun. And the second issue is the limited catalog of artists.
Yeah, I like how you described this to me when you were explaining to me what this service is.
I was browsing around. I was taking a look at the app, and literally all I could find was Metallica and the Dave Matthews Band.
What a combination.
Which is it's not really a good combination.
Not really.
But it's like literally the only artists I knew were Metallica and the Dave Matthews Band. And I figured, okay, I'm going to listen to a Metallica concert because I like Metallica. But you got to submit your credit card info. And I'm like, I don't really like that kind of a first run experience.
So, right. It's a lot of overhead when you've got a lot of subscriptions going. Then you got to make yourself a reminder to either cancel it or stay on. And
Yeah, but regardless, if you're into the Dave Matthews Band or Metallica or the other bands that are included in the nugs.net catalog, go check it out. And also, I believe that nugs.net is one of the few services that supports, what's it called? The Sony format, 360 audio, 360 reality audio.
Right.
Which is sort of that audio format that is supposed to sort of simulate the experience of being, at a concert, like to hear sound all around you. And a few smart speakers support that, including, I want to say, the Amazon Echo Studio.
Oh.
And I'm sure the new weird Sony speaker. Have you seen the new Sony speaker?
No.
John?
What are you talking about?
We linked it on Mac Stories Weekly a few weeks ago, I think.
Oh, all right.
It's a weird and it's like a $700 wireless speaker that supports the Alexa and 360 audio, and it's got this super weird shape that is totally like it's the ultimate Sony product. It's so weird and expensive, and I love it. Anyway, I'm gonna send you a link to that.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. Getting a good night's sleep is underrated, but with a little help, it can be life-changing. Pillow is an all-in-one sleep tracking solution to help you be more aware of your sleep patterns and discover what might be affecting your sleep quality. It's easy to fall into bad sleep habits, but with Pillow, you can get right back on track. If you have an Apple Watch, tracking your sleep is as easy as wearing it to bed. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically. One of Pillow's greatest features is its ability to provide detailed heart rate diagrams for every sleep session. You can even compare your sleep quality with other things like your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and many more health metrics to discover what might be impacting your sleep. Pillow can optionally record sounds that you make during the night, from sleep talking to sleep apnea and snoring or unexpected noises that might be disturbing your sleep. A lot of users are surprised by the results. Pillow is also very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored locally on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. Pillow doesn't have user accounts, so you can use it anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Naps are a great way to increase your focus, productivity, and overall creativity. So if you have an option to take a nap during the day, check out Pillow's Power Nap feature too. If you need an alarm, Pillow can do that on your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad. And as of watchOS 6, Pillow uses the extended runtime to minimize the battery consumption on your Apple Watch. Pillow also has home screen widgets so you can track your sleep analysis right from your home screen. Pillow is available on the App Store for the iPhone, Apple Watch, and iPad. Discover all of Pillow's great features at pillow.app. Again, that URL is pillow.app. I'll put a link in the show notes too. Pillow, sleeping better made simple. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show.
Moving on. Okay, so I got a bunch of, I want to mention two other streaming services. The first one is Qobuz. That's Qobuz. Now, Qobuz is fascinating for a bunch of reasons. Qobuz is the service for folks who want to listen to high-resolution audio. But it's not just that. What's fascinating about Qobuz is that they are combining a streaming service with a digital store. So they have their own store for purchasing those high-resolution albums or just standard CD quality albums. And in addition to that, if you subscribe to the more expensive tiers, I believe there's one called Qobuz Studio Premiere and another called Qobuz Sublime, which is just a perfect name for the most expensive tier. It's the Sublime tier, which I just love as a name. In those tiers, you also get exclusive editorial content. So articles, it's basically a paywall for... Oh, Siri just talked. Oh, Siri just transcribed everything I said. Please leave it on the show. This is fun. Thank you,
I've
Siri.
had that happen while we've been doing the show before too.
Yes. So you're effectively unlocking a paywall for a publication, right? And that is interesting for me because so they have multiple tiers. You can choose. You just want to stream music, go with the basic tier. You want high resolution music, go with the middle tier. You want high resolution music and original editorial content in the form of interviews, articles, deep dives into an artist's catalog or a decade of music, for example. You can get the most expensive tier and get all of that.
I am not surprised that this intrigues you. This is an interesting business model, I think.
It's an interesting business model, right? And I just feel like combining streaming and the separate digital store,
right.
So you already have that integration going, right? Because you can stream music, and then if you like an album, you can purchase the album from the same company. But then to also have on top of that, the original content, I don't know, it's a fascinating approach. And obviously they support all of the basic stuff. So AirPlay, iPhone and iPad app, Mac app. They also have Qobuz Connect, which is their version of Spotify Connect. So they integrate with some third-party manufacturers and their hardware to have direct Qobuz integration on that hardware. So you can buy speakers from, I don't know, the brand names right now.
I think this is probably where I heard of this company before, having gone through a bunch of tech specs on different speakers.
Yes, that's where you would see the name Qobuz because of Qobuz Connect. So I just wanted to mention this because, again, innovation in this space is possible if you just do things a little bit out of the ordinary, like having editorial content instead of a streaming service, right? I mean, I don't know. I think it's really interesting.
All right, Federico, you told me that you had another streaming service you wanted to tell me about. And I know that from looking at our notes that it's Tidal. And all I really know about Tidal is that Square basically bought them a couple of weeks ago, which I thought,
and Jay-Z and all of that.
yeah, I thought it was the strangest story. And I just loved the picture of Jay-Z with Jack Dorsey. I think that's one of the more memeable pictures to come out of a business deal in the last year or so. So tell me a little more about Tidal.
So Tidal has an unfortunate backstory is that it's really meme-worthy on the internet. So,
yes.
But try to set that aside. I really think that Tidal as a service and as an application on the iPhone and iPad, it's a really solid experience. So Tidal, I think, is mostly known because of the options that it offers to audiophiles, to people who want to listen to high-resolution audio. And what sets Tidal apart is the fact that they have two tiers, Tidal Hi-Fi and Tidal Master. So Tidal Hi-Fi is the CD quality version where you're going to listen to, again, CD quality FLAC files.
Okay.
Pretty standard stuff. What's really intriguing about Tidal is Tidal Master, which is advertised as sort of allowing you to listen to this faithful reproduction of music the way it was supposed to sound in the mastering suite, as just like the artist intended. That would be the idea. Now, what's even more fascinating about Tidal Master is that there's a debate in the audiophile community as to whether it really qualifies, right, as lossless and master quality audio. Because you see, Tidal uses this technology called MQA, which stands for Master Quality Authenticated, as its audio format. And you can read more about MQA in the links that we're going to put in the show notes. Basically, the debate involves whether MQA really is true uncompressed audio or not. Because MQA is based on this idea that in order to save bandwidth and to make it easier and quicker for you to stream those files, they use a technique called music origami. That is basically a first compression of the file, and then they use a core decoder compression tech to do the first, because it's called an origami, they do a first unfold of those files.
Okay.
So there's some compression involved, and some purists would say, well, that's not actually...
It's being decompressed, though, before you hear it, right? Is that how it works?
Yes, but that's how it works. But there's a debate about this. Some folks call MQA and similar technologies near lossless, which is just amusing. Like, how can something be near lossless? It's either lossless or lossy, but I don't know. Again, I don't want to get into all this. Just go read the links and make up your own opinion, I guess. Regardless, I personally do believe that MQA sounds very nice.
Yeah, well, you can just call it extremely good quality audio.
Extremely good quality audio sounds extremely good. That's what I would say. Especially if you have the right hardware to listen to that music. Also, just as an iPhone app, I think Tidal has some really nice touches. First of all, it looks really nice.
Yeah, it does.
I love the colors. I love the rounded corners. It's very friendly and approachable. But also, it feels like it strikes a nice balance of being friendly and having that feeling of pro at the same time. It's really nicely done. I love the fact that when you take a screenshot of an album or a song, the app detects the screenshot and it brings up a prompt that asks you, do you just want to copy the link to the song or the album? Because that's what people do, right? They take screenshots of albums and they send the screenshots to their friends. And Tidal detects that and asks you, do you just want to get the link and copy the link to your clipboard? Which I think it's a really nice touch.
It is a nice touch, and I've seen other apps do that, but very few do it. I think I have a travel app that does that, which it then offers to send like the travel details to somebody.
And lastly, also they have like these playlists for your listening activity. So they have playlists for your most played songs, and they also have monthly breakdowns. So like your most listened songs in January, in February, and that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
And finally, something I want to mention: Tidal, to my knowledge, is the only music streaming service that displays full credits for albums and songs.
Good for them.
Full credits. I mean, all the info about engineers, producers, performers, backing vocals, all kinds of stuff. You can see it all in Tidal. And I think I tweeted about this a few days ago. I think when I hear people say, other companies like Apple and Spotify don't do it because they don't have the data or because it's not what consumers ask for, I don't buy it. I think this is the kind of thing that it's the right thing to do, to give proper recognition to folks who work in the music industry.
Yeah, it's done with books, it's done with movies, it's done with TV, it's done with everything else.
Exactly. Why would you not do it with music as well? It doesn't hurt anyone. In fact, it's only useful because it shines a spotlight on engineers and performers who also make the art that we listen to. But unfortunately, these days,
right? And if you link it all up, then all of a sudden it's a new way for people to explore your service too.
Exactly. So, props to Tidal for getting this right and having it work well on mobile as well.
Okay.
Lastly, about music, John, I want to mention a service that it's not really it's not a service in the sense that Tidal and Amazon are services. Roon. So Roon.
Oh, I know Roon, and I don't remember why I looked at this and thought about doing something with it at some point, but it's a pretty neat service.
Roon is a really neat service. It's more similar to Plex in the sense that you install the Roon server on your computer, you point it to a folder where you store your music, and you let it work its magic to assemble a library, to gather metadata, and to present you your library with a specific UI. What's interesting about Roon is they have a twofold approach here. They can scan your computer for music, but you can also connect Roon to, guess what, Qobuz and Tidal.
Okay.
So if you want, you can expand your library by connecting to one of those two services. What really sets it apart, especially in the latest version, I believe it's version 1.8, they have this very opinionated design that it was inspired by classical music magazines. So very bold typography, all these sections that, it does look kind of like a magazine, sections of different sizes with different layouts. And it's what I love about Roon is that it reminds me of Prime Phonic in a way.
Okay.
Because they combine browsing your library and obviously listening to your music with learning more and reading more about your artists in your library. So they query online databases, and they present right there in the app not just your regular artist bio that you also get in Spotify and Apple Music, but a more expansive version of that. And what's even more fascinating about it is that all those explanations and those detailed breakdowns for artists and albums, they have something that you're gonna love, John: clickable links.
I love my links.
You love your links.
I do.
And when you can click them.
They're even better that way. You don't want a link that you can't click, Federico. Come on.
Exactly. So, for example, I was checking out the excellent 2018 album by Foxing.
That's a great one.
Really good album. And in the description for the album, the name Chris Walla was underlined.
Oh yeah, sure.
And obviously, Chris Walla, former member of Death Cab for Cutie, was the producer of the album. And you can click on the Chris Walla name, and it takes you to the Chris Walla profile page. And that page gathers also in your library, you can see Chris Walla was the producer on this record.
Oh, that's
But he was
nice.
also a performer on these albums. And that's just a super fascinating way to break down your library and learn more about, again, it's all about data that we already have, but thinking about different aspects, right?
Yeah, you've just described Obsidian for music, basically.
Basically,
Right?
That's what it is. When people say, "Oh, what does it mean to make connections?" This is making
This is
connections.
exactly what it
This
means.
is what it means. This is exactly what it means to find. Oh, wait, this person played the guitar on this album, but it's also the producer. Exactly. So, and the fact that Roon does this automatically just by scanning your music library. That's really fascinating. And lastly, I will say very nice implementation of queuing in Rune. You can select when you can hold down on songs in an album.
Okay.
And when you hold down, you can just tap on multiple checkboxes and then say, add these items to my queue.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to do it one by one. You can just hold down, select. It's like a file manager.
Yeah.
But it's very intuitive. You can just hold down, click, 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 and you add them to your queue. You don't have to do, like, if you want to do the same in Apple Music or Spotify, you got to do it on a song by song basis.
Right.
And here you can just select and add them all. And they support lyrics. And I really recommend you check out the Discover page.
I wanted to ask you about the iPhone app because you say in the notes that it requires the Mac app to be running.
Sure.
Does that mean that you have to have it on your local network too, do you know? Or can you use it elsewhere as kind of, I guess, remotely connecting to your server?
If there's a way to use it outside of my home network, I still haven't figured it out.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was afraid of.
Like, even when you use the iPhone app, when you quit the Mac app that also acts as the server running, it pauses playback on the iPhone.
Oh, okay.
So the Mac app needs to be running all the time. But I do think that there has to be a way, but you have to add what they call, I think, Rune cores to your setup. So basically like some kind of server that is separate from your Mac or PC.
Points out to the open internet, basically.
I think so.
All right. Well, Federico, to close out this lengthy episode, I want to mention 2 internet radio apps because I think internet radio doesn't get enough attention. The thing is that, radio isn't what it used to be. However, with internet radio, you have your choice of thousands and thousands of stations to choose from all over the world. And there are still a lot of really good stations out there. And I know there are a handful here in the United States that I like to listen to that'll have shows on alternative music and that kind of thing. But you can really find an internet radio station for just about any interest you have in music or news and things like that, for that matter. And the 2 apps that I've used that I like a lot are Triode by the Icon Factory. Triode has a curated list of stations that they recommend. It's a really good list and a great way to kind of get you started. But you can also favorite your own stations, the whole setup that you create with favorites and that kind of thing. It syncs over all your devices, and the app is available on iPhone, iPad, Mac, and even the Apple TV. So you can enjoy it that way too. And the one that I've used the most, though, and most recently, is Steve Troughton Smith's Broadcasts, because that app, it's free to download, and Steve has a series of Irish radio stations as kind of the defaults on the free app. And that just gives you an ability then to try it out and see how it works and if you like it. If you pay for it with the in-app purchase, then you're able to add any stations that you want. And it just recently got updated. It's on the Mac, iOS, and iPad OS. And you can do things like, it has an AirPlay destination picker now, and it's sleep timer. And the UI just looks great on Big Sur because Steve updated for that as well. So definitely check those 2 out if you're interested in internet radio. And having reviewed these, I didn't think I really would be, but I just haven't spent a lot of time with any radio stations in a long time, and you can really discover some nice things that way. Okay, Federico. Well, that ends our mini-series on music. So we'll be moving on. Next week, we will...
Yay. This was fun, though.
It was a lot of fun.
Like, I love... Yeah.
I think you can tell probably that Federico and I spend an awful lot of time thinking about and playing music. And I learned a lot of this.
Look, it's either that or Markdown. It's those 2 things.
That's true. We're at least 2-dimensional people at this point. Wow. All right. Well, yes. And I learned a lot this episode because a lot of these alternatives and companion services I wasn't familiar with, but Federico has been experimenting an awful lot, especially since he's been doing his high definition audio along the way. I think next week we'll probably start diving into the run up to WWDC because we'll be fresh off an Apple event, and I'm sure there'll be app aspects of that we'll want to talk about on the show. But we'll see. We'll make that decision once we see what's announced at the at the event tomorrow. I want to thank our 3 sponsors again for this episode. That's Devon Think, Linode, and Pillow. You can find Federico on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.